It was March 1971, on the Universal Studios backlot in Los Angeles, California. A first-time director was standing behind a camera, trying to set up a shot for his debut film, while a veteran cinematographer stood beside him, arms crossed, shaking his head in visible disapproval. The crew of 45 people watched in uncomfortable silence, as this power struggle played out for the third consecutive day. What nobody realized was that in approximately 4 hours, one of these men would walk off this set and never work on a major Hollywood production again. This is not a story about filmmaking or directing, or even about movies. This is about respect, creative vision, and the moment when patience transforms into authority. In 1971, the film industry operated on a rigid hierarchy that had been established over 50 years of studio system tradition. Directors were expected to have decades of experience before earning the right to call the shots. Cinematographers, especially veteran ones with impressive credits, were treated as technical experts whose opinions carried enormous weight. The unwritten rule was simple. Young directors deferred to experienced crew. You climbed the ladder slowly, paid your dues, and only after proving yourself repeatedly did you earn true creative control. This system worked because it valued experience over vision, seniority over innovation, and tradition over instinct. When someone broke this hierarchy, especially someone making their directorial debut, the system pushed back hard. Clint Eastwood was 41 years old and already an international star. The Dollars trilogy had made him one of the most recognizable faces in cinema. Dirty Harry was about to make him a legend. But directing was different territory. Behind the camera, his star power meant nothing to the crew members who'd been working in Hollywood since before Clint had arrived in California. To them, he was just another actor who thought he could direct. They'd seen it before. Actors with big egos and small understanding of the technical complexities of filmmaking. Most failed spectacularly. Clint had chosen Play Misty for Me as his directorial debut carefully. It was a psychological thriller, modestly budgeted at under $1 million through his production company Malpaso. The story was tight, the locations were mostly in Carmel, where Clint lived, and the shooting schedule was aggressive but manageable. He'd hired a crew recommended by Universal, including a cinematographer we'll call Frank Morrison. Morrison was 62 years old with 40 years of experience. He'd shot over 70 films, worked with legendary directors, and had very strong opinions about how movies should be made. Strong opinions he wasn't shy about sharing. The first day of principal photography started at 6 in the morning. Clint arrived at 5:30, having already walked the location, knowing exactly what shots he wanted. He'd storyboarded extensively, studied other thrillers, and spent months preparing. But when he began explaining his vision for the opening sequence to Morrison, the cinematographer interrupted him. "That won't work," Morrison said flatly, not even looking at Clint's storyboards. "The lighting ratio you're describing is technically impractical for this location. We need to set it up the traditional way, 3-point lighting, standard coverage. I've been doing this since you were in high school, Clint. Trust me." Clint paused, considering his response. He was new to directing. Morrison was experienced. Maybe the cinematographer was right. "Let's try it your way first," Clint said quietly. "Then we'll see." But Morrison's way took 3 hours to set up, used more lights than budgeted, and created exactly the look Clint didn't want. Flat, even, safe, television lighting, not cinema. "This doesn't match what I want for the film," Clint said, his voice still calm. "It's too bright, too even. I need more contrast, more shadow." Morrison sighed loudly, making sure the crew heard his frustration. "Clint, that's not how professionals shoot. Shadow means losing detail. Audiences need to see the actors' faces clearly. This is proper cinematography. What you're asking for is amateur hour." The crew exchanged glances. This was day one, and already the cinematographer was publicly contradicting the director. Clint made a decision. He thanked Morrison for setting up the shot, then politely asked him to adjust it closer to what he'd originally envisioned. Morrison complied, but slowly, reluctantly, making his disapproval obvious through every adjustment. When they finally shot the scene, it took twice as long as scheduled. The first day wrapped 3 hours behind schedule. That evening, Clint's producer approached him with concern. "Frank's making this difficult. He's undermining you in front of the crew." "I noticed," Clint said. "Give it another day. Maybe he just needs to adjust to working with a first-time director." But the second day was worse. Morrison arrived with what he called suggestions for how Clint should direct the actors. "You're letting them improvise too much," Morrison told Clint in front of the cast and crew during a scene rehearsal. "Real directors come prepared with exactly what they want. You're making it up as you go. That's not professional." Clint, rehearsing with Jessica Walter for a crucial emotional scene, stopped and turned to Morrison. "I am prepared. I'm also allowing the actors room to find the truth of the scene. That's directing. That's television," Morrison shot back. "In real films, directors have complete control. Hitchcock knew every frame before shooting. Hawks knew every angle. You're being indecisive." Several crew members were now openly watching this confrontation. Morrison was treating Clint like a student who needed instruction, not a director who deserved respect. "Frank," Clint said, his voice still quiet, but with an edge now, "I need you to focus on the camera work and let me direct the actors. That's how this works." Morrison shrugged, making it clear he thought Clint was making a mistake, but he returned to his camera position. Throughout the day, Morrison continued to offer unsolicited opinions, question Clint's shot choices, and make comments to younger crew members about how real directors operated. By lunch, the set had divided into two camps: those who respected Clint's authority as director, and those who deferred to Morrison's experience. The second day wrapped 4 hours behind schedule. Clint's producer and first assistant director both approached him that evening. "You need to replace him," the AD said bluntly. "He's sabotaging the production. He's also telling the younger crew members that you don't know what you're doing," the producer added. "It's affecting morale. People are questioning your decisions because Frank's questioning them first." Clint sat quietly, thinking. He didn't want to fire anyone, especially not on his first film. Firing a veteran cinematographer would make waves, might get him labeled as difficult, could damage his reputation before his directing career even started. But he also knew that if he didn't establish authority now, he'd lose control of his own production. One more day, Clint decided. If it doesn't change tomorrow, we'll make a change. The third day started with a crucial scene, an intense confrontation between the two lead characters that required precise blocking, specific lighting, and emotional authenticity from the actors. Clint had planned this scene meticulously. He knew exactly what he wanted. He explained the setup to Morrison, showed him the storyboards, described the emotional arc. Morrison listened, then shook his head. "No, that's not going to work," he said, loud enough for the assembled crew to hear. "You're overcomplicating it. We need standard coverage. Master shot, over the shoulders, close-ups. That's how you shoot a dialogue scene. What you're describing is pretentious and impractical." Clint felt something shift inside him, not anger, not frustration, clarity. This wasn't about experience versus inexperience. This was about respect. Morrison wasn't trying to help make a better film. He was trying to assert dominance, to prove that the cinematographer, not the director, was really in charge. "Frank," Clint said quietly, "we're doing it the way I described." "You're making a mistake," Morrison said, turning to the crew. "Real directors understand coverage. They understand that you need options in editing. What Clint's asking for limits our choices later. I've worked with directors who actually knew what they were doing, and they would never gather your equipment," Clint interrupted, his voice still quiet, but carrying absolute finality. Morrison stopped mid-sentence. "What?" "Gather your equipment," Clint repeated. His eyes locked on Morrison. "You're done. There's a car waiting to take you back to LA." The set went completely silent. 45 people frozen, watching. Morrison's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, anger, disbelief. "You can't fire me in the middle of production," Morrison said, his voice rising now. "I have a contract. I have credits. Longer than your entire career. You're a first-time director who doesn't know what he's doing, and you're firing me." "I'm the director of this film," Clint said, his tone unchanged. Calm but absolute. "You've questioned my decisions for 3 days. You've undermined me in front of my crew. You've made it clear you don't respect my authority. So yes, I'm firing you. Gather your equipment." Morrison looked around at the crew, perhaps expecting support, solidarity, someone to object. He found none. The crew members who'd been deferring to his experience were now carefully looking away. They'd all seen the disrespect. They'd all heard him undermine Clint repeatedly. Whatever sympathy they might have had evaporated in the face of Morrison's public insubordination. "You're making the biggest mistake of your career," Morrison said to Clint, his voice shaking with anger now. "I'll make sure everyone in Hollywood knows that you're impossible to work with, that you can't handle experienced professionals, that you're just an actor pretending to be a director." "That's your choice," Clint said simply. "But right now you need to leave my set." Morrison stared at Clint for a long moment, perhaps waiting for him to back down, to apologize, to reconsider. Clint didn't move, didn't blink, didn't waver. Finally, Morrison grabbed his light meter, gestured to his camera assistants to start packing his equipment, and walked off the set without another word. After Morrison left, Clint turned to his assistant director. "Call Bruce Surtees, see if he's available." Then he addressed the crew, all of whom were still standing in shocked silence. "We're behind schedule, and we need to make up time. Let's reset for this scene. I'll operate the camera myself until we get a replacement. We have work to do." The crew erupted into motion. There was a palpable energy now, different from the tension that had dominated the past 3 days. People were smiling, moving with purpose. Several crew members approached Clint privately during the reset. "That needed to happen," one grip said. "He was making this miserable for everyone." Bruce Surtees arrived the next day and stayed for the rest of the production. He and Clint developed a collaborative relationship built on mutual respect. Surtees brought technical expertise, Clint brought creative vision, and together they created the visual style that made Play Misty for me distinctive. The film wrapped on time and under budget. The story of Clint firing Morrison on day 3 spread through Hollywood within a week. In an industry that thrived on gossip, this kind of confrontation became instant legend. Morrison tried to control the narrative, telling people that Clint was inexperienced and temperamental, that he'd been fired for offering professional guidance. But too many crew members had witnessed what actually happened. The truth came out. Morrison had been fired for insubordination, for repeatedly undermining a director, for confusing experience with wisdom. The impact on Morrison's career was immediate and permanent. Other directors heard the story and made a simple calculation. If Morrison couldn't respect a director's authority, even a first-time director, he was a liability. Studios stopped calling. His agent stopped getting him interviews for major production. Within 2 years, Morrison was working exclusively on low-budget independent films and television commercials. By 1975, he'd left the industry entirely. Play Misty for Me was released in November 1971. Critics praised Clint's confident direction, the film's visual style, and its psychological intensity. It made over $10 million on a budget under $1 million. More importantly, it proved Clint could direct. Over the next 5 decades, Clint Eastwood directed over 40 films. He won 4 Academy Awards, 2 for Best Director and 2 for Best Picture. He became one of the most respected filmmakers in cinema history. His films grossed billions worldwide. He worked with the greatest cinematographers in the industry, all of whom respected his vision while contributing their expertise. Years later, in an interview about his directorial career, Clint was asked about firing the cinematographer on his first film. His response was characteristically brief. Respect isn't about age or experience. It's about recognizing that someone has authority and vision. That cinematographer had 40 years of experience, but he didn't have respect for the process or for me as the director. You can't make a film when someone's actively undermining you. So I made a choice. It was the right choice. But crew members who were there tell a more complete story. They talk about how Morrison had created a toxic environment in just 3 days, how younger crew members were confused about who was actually in charge, how every decision became a debate instead of a direction. And they talk about the moment Clint said, "Gather your equipment," with that quiet, absolute authority. No shouting, no drama, just a line drawn that couldn't be crossed. One crew member put it perfectly 20 years later in a documentary about Clint's career. Morrison thought experience meant he knew better. Clint showed him that vision matters more than years, and he did it so calmly, so definitively, that everyone on that set learned something, including me. Authority isn't about being loud, it's about being certain. Today, Play Misty for me is considered one of the best directorial debuts in Hollywood history. Film schools study it as an example of confident, assured filmmaking. The visual style that Morrison called amateur hour is now taught as innovative and bold, and the story of Clint firing his cinematographer on day 3 has become a lesson taught to every film student. When you're in charge, you have to actually be in charge. Respect your crew's expertise, but never let anyone undermine your authority. Experience without respect is just ego. And sometimes the best response to someone questioning your vision is 3 quiet words that end the conversation permanently. If this story of creative authority and quiet strength moved you, subscribe and share it with someone starting their own journey who needs to remember that vision matters more than validation, and respect is earned through work, not demanded through experience. Have you ever had to stand your ground against someone more experienced? Share your story in the comments.